Welcome to a series of interviews with ALA presidential candidates for the 2016-17 term. I'm library technology consultant Carson. In our conversation, we explore both tech and non-tech library leadership topics. Our guest today is Jamie LaRue. In seventh grade, Jamie LaRue founded the Library Club, where he led a team of early geeks in shelving and general duties at his school library. He has also worked as a public library volunteer, a circ clerk, an academic reference librarian, supervisor of branches, IT and tech services, and as a public library administrator. A published poet and chapbook editor, he is also author of The New Inquisition, Understanding and Managing Intellectual Freedom Challenges. Jamie is now an independent writer, speaker, and consultant, focused mostly on the future of libraries. Jamie, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Carson. A pleasure to be with you.
Please give me your elevator speech. What makes libraries important in 2015?
Okay, I think as I've tried to approach this, my whole platform, if you will, comes down to about three things. The first two pieces of it is that we transform lives. This is something we've heard from many ALA presidents because it's just so dang true. We transform lives and we build better communities. So now let's talk about how we do that over the next 2-3 years. I think the first thing is to focus on digital publishing. There is a revolution going on, and libraries need to move from being gatekeepers in that revolution to being gardeners, to help people create content and connect these new streams of content to our communities. Mm-hmm. And then the second piece is kind of a shift from this, there's something powerful happening in reference right now, and it's no longer waiting passively at a desk for people to come up and ask you questions. Elvis has to leave the building. We've got to go out into the community and start asking questions and catalog community issues and aspirations, come back and figure out what projects we can do to move our communities forward. So it's part of this continuation from a shift in the old days of an inward focus on libraries to a more community-based librarianship. And by community here, I don't just mean a city or a municipality. I'm also talking about academic and schools.
Yeah.
And then finally, the something that all of the librarians seem to know, and early childhood educators get this, is that the smartest investment any community can make is in the minds of the young. And this wonderful research that's come out in 2010 says that if I can get 500 books in the home of a child between the ages of 0 and 5, it's as good as having 2 parents with master's degrees, regardless of their education, regardless of their income. So that one determinant, 500 books in the home, means fewer kids go to jail, more kids graduate, they're healthier as children, they live longer, and they make more money. So if all we want to do is to save the world, why not focus on getting 500 books in people's homes?
Yes, the proactive approach, right?
You got it.
How have your beliefs about libraries influenced your current work or your past work?
I find that the more I think about how I got involved in libraries, the more I wind up singing this love poem to Mrs. Johnson, who was the first librarian I ever met. And I remember walking in one day saying, I just read this comic book about the speed of light. How did they figure out how fast light was and what made them think it even traveled? And then Mrs. Johnson beams at me and she smiles and says, "What a fascinating question."
That's nice.
And I thought, had me at hello, right? So here's a librarian who said, what librarians do is they honor that spirit of inquiry. And so for me, that kind of early encounter was that libraries are benevolent institutions. We have a community that set this up just so kids could wander in off the street and ask questions, and every adult snaps to attention to help you. So for me, like that early encounter translates to two things. For individuals, libraries of all types are bootstraps. They help you ascend whatever ladder you want to build, to whatever moon you want to climb to. And then for communities, it's just the smartest investment there is. Again, if you want to help people, if you want to reduce all of these social problems, literacy is the path for that. And so I guess the big shift that I made, I remember after I was a library director for about 10 years, I used to think if a really good director would find a way to make the community support the library. And then I realized after about 10 years that I had it absolutely backwards, that the job of the library is to build a great community. So that's kind of that's how I got from Mrs. Johnson to what I believe about libraries today.
And speaking of beliefs, because I believe that beliefs are at our core, and they're responsible for a lot of our behaviors. And um, one belief I have about libraries is that the great ones are hyper local, and what I mean by that is they understand the needs of their communities and they create services and collections to meet those needs. Being hyper local, though, makes it a little more difficult for us to work together at scale, us being other libraries or all libraries. For instance, tackling big issues such as bandwidth, ebooks, and even the performance of ILS systems. What's your take on that concept?
Well, I guess I'll start off with this idea that tech infrastructure, as you know, is expensive. And what happens all across the country, everybody adopted an ILS system, and everybody adopts their own cataloging processes, and we all have this incredible duplication of effort. And what we need now are scalable systems, and ebooks, I think, are the perfect example. When I was at Douglas County Libraries, we put together, as you know, this kind of an ebook platform, and it took $100,000 and about 3 years of effort to get everything to come out right. Well, that's not scalable. Every individual library can't do that. So what that means is that for projects like that, we need to go at least statewide at a minimum. Regional is probably smarter. It'd be great if we could do and like a DPLA sort of a national infrastructure for ebooks, but I think there are also a lot of political obstacles to that.
Yeah,
so this idea about moving web scale, as OCLC talks about it, getting things so that they're really running on large shared platforms is clearly the right direction. But when you talk about hyperlocal, the shift that I'm making in my own understanding about collection of content is that, again, we're seeing this extraordinary growth in the streams of content from independent publishers and self-publishers. And so what that means is that as people start to create all this stuff, how does it get discovered? The problem of the 21st century is not how do you get published, because that's getting to be pretty easy. The problem is, how does anybody find you? And so I think libraries need to step up to this, and as we see in Ann Arbor with music collections, we see in universities with student papers and theses, we see in schools with teachers creating content, we see in local public libraries, authors are starting to create fan fiction that turns into bestsellers. So that kind of hyperlocal, where libraries swim upstream and connect with the creators of content in their own communities, is, I think, an emerging new role for libraries of all kinds.
What is the most powerful role for technology in libraries?
Well, probably depends on the user, but I'll give you a couple of perspectives. I think there are three things that the user wants. One of them is bridging the digital divide. And so I was blown away to find out that if you want to work at Walmart, you have to apply online.
Yes, most employers are going that direction, I think. I think it's safe to say most employers.
And so when we were going through the recession, we saw people coming to the library to say, gee, I need to retool, or I need to look for a job, or I want to write my resume. And so the library was the safety net. We bridged that digital divide to connect people to technology they couldn't afford. But then the thing I noticed is that even in some place like Douglas County, where fairly well-to-do, very tech-savvy people, we still have people coming into the library looking for access to what's new. So now they want high-speed equipment, and they want high-end software, and they want a chance to kind of shop around a little bit before they spring for that the purchase themselves. So access to what's new is a big piece. And then I think it's just access, period. And what I'm learning is that if you want to be a good citizen, if you really want to know what's going on in the world around you, just watching TV and reading a newspaper doesn't cut it anymore.
That's correct.
You got to be hooked in, and so it's an essential for student engagement. So that's the core use for technology for libraries, is access and various guises. And then institutionally, I'm saying this, and I bet you see it as a consultant, there's this third wave of automation that's coming back into libraries, and it's liberating labor. And so I see things like RFID self-check that's coming in, that suddenly, the mainstay of the public library for a century or more was the circulation department. Well, suddenly it's not.
Mm.
You can dismantle all that stuff, and you've got technology that liberates staff to go out and do something new, to have more meaningful conversations with the community. So I'm not sure which is most powerful, just the access or the fact that we're freeing up librarian help to apply their intelligence to their communities in a new way.
Certainly. Yeah, those are good perspectives. What are the most compelling technological issues facing libraries?
Yeah, okay, I'll just be blunt, speaking as a former library administrator. I think it's cost. So what I see is that too many of the librarians that I talk to take a passive response. We're waiting for the vendors to drive the marketplace. And if you just look again at the ebook issue or at the escalation in price of ILS systems, we're losing purchasing power. And in the public library world, it's the big five who are pricing the ebook 6 to 8 times greater than what a consumer pays. In the academic world, it's electronic journal subscriptions and manuscripts. I was talking with a big university library director, and he said that 10 years ago, he spent maybe 45–50% of his collection budget on leased access. And he said now it's more like 95. And the price for these things, the big bundling of electronic subscriptions, is so huge that, in fact, we have declining use because we have declining inventory. We're not buying as much new stuff as we should. So I think that's the big issue. The second one is probably expertise. The reason consultants like yourself stay in business is because most of the libraries that I talk to don't have the in-depth technical expertise to, do fundamental infrastructure changes. The competition for wages in the public library world, school library world versus, the for-profit enterprise world is pretty huge. So trying to find and bring up a group of people who not only have the skills but share the values of librarianship is a huge challenge.
Well, at Douglas, you were one of, I think, a relatively small group of libraries that made a significant investment in developing that internal technological expertise as a way of meeting your goals and vision for library services. That comes with a cost, though, and I think that it would be. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about what you had to do to actually make that a priority and make it successful. I think it's been very successful at Douglas.
Well, it comes with a cost and it comes with a savings. So the cost is whenever you're doing something that really moves into the software development world, that means you're taking risks. And so your systems may not be quite as stable, as tested, as some of the things that you hope would be true in the for-profit world, in the commercial world. So you're going to stumble. You've got arrows in the chest. You're trying to figure out ways to test out something that's never been done before, and it's the same issues that software developers face. It takes time. You get egg on your face. You have to fix it. You have to kind of explain to your community that you are developing a solution because the solution that you want doesn't exist in the marketplace. And I think the other side, though, is the savings. And again, to kind of go back to the ebook one, if I go through Overdrive to buy the latest Danielle Steele, it costs me $84. And so there's a cost for that. If we build our own system and we hook up with smashwords.com and we talk directly to the authors and buy, host, and deliver the ebooks ourselves, the average cost was $4 per title. And so suddenly we've greatly expanded, we've saved money, we've expanded our ability to acquire the content that our patrons are getting more and more curious about. So I think that's the trade-off. There's a risk that you can fail or flub or not do as well as something and not have the fit and polish that you would hope you'd find in the commercial world. But on the other hand, you're first at the table, so you get to set the terms and define the marketplace and buy more content.
So do you think there'll be a time when there'll be less of a disparity for the Danielle Steeles of the world as far as the cost of that content through a mechanism like you've described or some other? Because that is quite a cost differential, but I think that's also reflective of the market price for that at this point, something that we've been struggling with electronic access in libraries. It seems disproportionate to our print collections, but still, it's not something that's settled out yet.
Well, I find that I bristle a little bit against the idea of a market price. How many publishers are there in the United States? There are literally hundreds. There are more than 1,000. But the big five are the ones that are kind of driving these screwy license, high price kinds of differentials that are, in my opinion, actually damaging them. If you take a look at what's happening to the big five publishers, they're seeing that their margin of profit is rising because 50% of the sales of bestsellers are now ebooks, and it doesn't cost as much to produce the ebook, to print and distribute it and send it around as it does print. So it should cost less. Well, so the margin of profit is higher, but the volume of sales is falling. And why is that? Because fewer copies are available in the places where people go looking for books, libraries. And so my read on the marketplace is that you have a couple of big players who are doing this short-term grab for a profit. And I believe that the difficulty of purchasing content from them, the high price, the weird licensing restrictions, will inevitably drive us to those hundreds of other publishers who are eager to get into the library market. And so as that happens, you'll see the price falling, you'll see closer relationships between libraries and authors, and I think that's very much to the good of the community and to the good of the library. I'm not sure it's to the good of the big five publishers.
Technology moves quickly, and many libraries have trouble keeping up, let alone a large organization such as ALA, which uses technology for its own operations, and it also influences and acts as a resource for libraries across the country in terms of tech practices and tech policy. What is your assessment of ALA's technological agility?
I think an organization that tries to serve, some 57,000 librarians, on all of whom have different expectations, agility might not be quite the word we're looking for here. And I think here, to underscore that first challenge, I think like all libraries, there's not as much tech talent on tap for the association as we need. And second, as I was saying, there are so many constituencies and needs for those constituencies. It's really hard to build a focused and elegant response. And I spent some time over the...
We certainly have a diverse group. I think ALA, the members that it serves, is just as diverse for them as it is for us in serving at the local level or in any municipal level. It's hugely diverse. So I certainly don't mean that as a criticism, but having a level of agility is key, I think, to keep up.
Well, and as I take a look at ALA has done a lot in the past several years to be very active in publishing and then in the social media world, so Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest, and I think it's made extraordinary strides with that. So I see, but I think ALA struggles with the same issue that many library websites struggle with. There's so much information that at some point it gets to be difficult to find it. I remember having a conversation a couple of years ago with the executive director of ALA and then President Maureen Sullivan. I said, is it possible for ALA to step into the breach and become the ebook platform for the nation? And then you realize when you look at this is that the focus of ALA is more about membership issues connecting. It doesn't provide actual marketplace solutions. It provides publishing and continuing education and networking and support for that kind of communication. And I think within that realm, it actually does quite well.
The advocacy too. There's these chunks of advocacy, especially in digital areas, new frontiers in digital. That I know I get to be, I get to hear those things, and I wonder if the message is spread more further than just who are interested. Right? I think that's part of the challenge. But that's a great response. Many libraries are undergoing a shift in mindset from transactional to transformational. What does that mean to you, and how can such a change be best facilitated?
Okay, well, here's the story that I love to tell about Mrs. Johnson. So I'm 11 years old and in 5th grade, and I walk into the brand new teen section of the library, and Mrs. Johnson says, "Jamie, I've been saving a book for you." She says, "You need to read this book." And so she hands me this big honking Dialogues of Plato. And I went, okay, who would do this to an 11-year-old, right? So I go home kind of, trusting Mrs. Johnson, and I open up the book, and it says, and Socrates asked, what is wise? And I have been thinking about that, Carson, ever since. And so talk about transformational. It's like the thing that changes lives or can change communities is just the sensitivity, intelligence, mindfulness of the librarian. And that's the powerful thing. And so what does that show up? That's one circulation statistic, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I think the next piece of this, so how do you take this transformational engine that's at the heart of successful librarianship and take it up to the next level? And so again, it goes back to the shift from passive. It's no longer sufficient for us to wait for somebody to come to a desk, to come to the building. We have to go to them. We have to market to the life transitions that when people hit those things, suddenly they look around for help. And because we have marketed successfully, they remember that we're there. We have to leave the building. We have to connect to creators. And I think the shift that I'm seeing, and kind of been doing some teaching at DU, some library science master's classes, and I see this kind of next generation of librarians that's coming up where they are eager to get out into the community, where they not only have that service ethic where I want to help each individual that comes in. It's like, if I could make my whole community better, why wouldn't I want to do that? And so step one, what do you focus on to become a transformational institution, is you leave the safety of the structure, you engage with your communities, variously described, and you start paying attention. So that's how it starts.
What is the one thing you wish to change in libraries during your term, and how will you change it?
I think the theme that I am pressing in all three of these planks about gatekeeper to gardener, community asset to community leader, investors in the future for early literacy, is that this idea is that it is we can no longer be library centric. We have to be community centric. So what I want to change is, building on the good work of some presidents before me here, is to say we need to look out. We need to stop gazing into our own navels and say there's a revolution happening around us, and how do we move from the fringe of it to the heart of it?
What is the one thing that must not change, and why?
The thing that always impresses me is that people trust librarians. I mean, they really do. It's hard to find anybody who hates librarians. We have 150 years of respect. We treat people with respect. We honor their sense of curiosity. We are wide open. Librarians know their jobs. We adapt quickly, and we do them well. And so the thing that must not change is this kind of deep value that we have to everything from intellectual freedom to patron confidentiality to this just simple respect for everybody that we run across.
What makes you the best choice for ALA president?
Well, I suppose that's an individual decision that the voters will have to make. But I can tell you this. There are many fine candidates, and it really is an honor to be among them. And I guess as I was going back and looking at some of the voting patterns in the past, and out of those 57,000 librarians, we don't have much better than a 25% turnout for votes. But this is the first year, I believe. I found other years when there were, so there are 2 nominated candidates, and then we have 2 petition candidates. And I have to believe that that's a good thing. That indicates to me that there is a broadening interest in what we require from our leadership, and we have greater activity on the part of the members trying to get involved in that. I guess the thing that distinguishes me from the other candidates, I believe, is that alone among them, I've spent my whole career talking to non-librarians. In my judgment, the purpose of the president of ALA is not so much the internal focus. I think we have to walk that talk to get out there and say, be the face of the library to non-librarians. Librarians already know that we're valuable. It's the rest of our society that seems to need some coaching about that. I have over 25 years as a weekly newspaper columnist. That's learning to talk about library stuff to the public. I hosted an internet radio show. I was a cable TV author interview host. I've served on boards of charter schools, Rotary Youth Initiatives, National Health Studies, and I guess what that means is that I have worked very hard in the course of my career to say, how do you really listen to this authorizing environment? What do they talk about in that world in which we have to be present and visible and show leadership if we want to secure resources not only to fulfill the institutional missions, but to, again, make those communities better? So what makes me unique, I think, is a lifetime of work outside the library.
Imagine that you've been elected and you're nearing the end of your term. How will you know that you've been successful?
Well, let's go back to those three planks in the platform. The first one is, I would like to see, and I think this is inevitable, greater awareness and attention to these emerging streams of content. And by that I mean, if you pick up American libraries, it won't just be reviews of what's going on in the Big Six. It'll be real profiles of what's happening in the world of independent publishing. It will be awards and reviews and sales figures that talk about how libraries have not just purchased from, but partnered with the new creators and distributors of content. That would be one measure. And then the second one about community, the library as a community leader. I'd like to see more librarians with a seat at the table. And so that means you go to a conference or you read professional articles. You'll see more things, not just about us out talking to people, but librarians serving as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, or librarians serving as being elevated to a provost or a dean. We need to not, again, just analyze things, but to step out there and contribute to directions for change. And then I think the last thing about this importance of early literacy is we just need more media coverage. Again, librarians, early educators know this, but prison officials don't, and city planners don't, and university planners could maybe need someone to connect the dots about why early literacy is important to the life of a college. And the answer is, if you don't have early literacy, they don't go to college.
Mind your customers.
That's right. That's right.
Jamie, I want to thank you so much. I greatly enjoyed our chat today. Thank you for making the time for this. This has been most enjoyable for me.
A pleasure for me too, Carson. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Folks, we'll also have interviews with the other ALA candidates. So if you wish, be sure to give those a listen. And thanks for spending your time together today.